Great. All right. Okay, I think we have critical mass. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. Welcome, everyone. If you haven't seen my face, I'm Harper Brokaw-Falbo. I'm the gallery manager here at Blue Sky. And we're here with Birthe Piontek and Jason Cox to talk about photo books. This is kind of a newish series that we're testing out what's in a book, just trying to really explore the connection between photography, photo books, what we do in the gallery, and what happens on the page. I'm going to briefly read our land acknowledgement. All right. Oops. Okay. We here at Blue Sky humbly acknowledge that our programming is being held on the traditional lands of the Multnomah, Cathlamet, Clackamas, Band of Chinook, Tualatin, Kalapuya, Molalla, and many other tribes who made their homes along the Columbia, Wamal, and Willamette rivers. In this online format, you may be participating from other areas, and we invite you to consider your own land acknowledgement that reflects your location. We also acknowledge that the very technology we rely on for these online programs is inequitably distributed and not equally accessible, creating new virtual displacements and exclusions. We call attention to the need for action now and in the future to address these disparities. So, as I mentioned, we here at Blue Sky are excited and interested in exploring the photo book. Currently, Birthe's work is on view here at Blue Sky through March 31st, and we're going to get into this a little bit more, but Janus is actually going to be one of our featured member books this year at Blue Sky. So you can kind of go on our website and learn more about that, or reach out to us after this if you are curious what that means. So Jason Koxvold is a mixed media artist based in Portland, Oregon, with a focus on the intersection of economics and violence. He holds a BSc in social science from the University of Edinburgh, Scotland, and has worked for the last decade on a series of long-term projects that combine studio practice and installation works with photographs made across the globe in places like Arctic Russia, South Africa, Afghanistan, and Nigeria. Koxvold is also the founder of Gnomic book, an imprint focused on developing challenging projects by emerging and mid-career artists in small, high-quality editions. And we are so happy to have Jason here in Portland with us. He's been, no stranger at the gallery, and we've got to see lots of the wonderful books he's published.
Thank you.
And then Birthe Piontek is a visual artist living on the unceded territories of the Coast Salish peoples in Vancouver, BC, Canada. Born and raised in Germany, Piontek moved to Canada in 2005 after receiving her MFA from the Folkwang University of the Arts in Essen, Germany. Her work has been exhibited internationally in both solo and group shows and is featured in many private and public collections, such as the Museum of Contemporary Photography in Chicago and the Museum of Applied Arts in Gera, Germany. Piontek's project, The Idea of North, won the Critical Mass Book Award 2009 and was published as a monograph in 2011. Her project, Abendlied, which is currently here at Blue Sky until through Saturday, received the Edward Burtniski Grant, I'm so sorry for butchering that, in 2018 and was nominated by Time Magazine as one of the best photo books in 2019. The most recent work, Janus, was published by Gnomic Book in 2021. Piontek is currently an assistant professor of photography in the Auden Faculty of Art at Emily Carr University of Art and Design in Vancouver, and a member of the Cake Collective. All right, and this is actually Birthe's work on view right now at Blue Sky. All right, so I'm going to pass it over to Jason and Birthe to talk a bit more about kind of their collaboration and the books that have come out of it, both of which you can also see here at Blue Sky.
Thank you so much. It's really a pleasure to be here. I've been looking forward to this chat for a while. Birthe and I had this plan where we're kind of just going to chat a little bit about, first about Gnomic Book and then about how Abendlied and Janus came to life. It's going to be fairly free form. I think we're going to talk for about 45 minutes and then there's time for questions at the end. So if you have those, please put them in the chat. Shall I begin by sharing that presentation.
Yes.
We should. Let's do it. Okay, let's see if I can figure out a way to do this that doesn't break everything. Okay, here we go. So, Birthe, jump in whenever. I'm just gonna start rambling. What's in a book? What do we do here at Gnomic Book, I suppose? We began Gnomic. It was initially just me in about 2016. And initially it was just a way of publishing my own book, Knives, to save me from having to knock on 1,000 doors and talk to other publishers out in the world. And I realized that Knives, while I'm happy with the book, is just a book. It has a cover, it has pages in the middle, and that's about it. But there's so much more that you can do with the form of the book. And so Knives began for me this process of exploring what it means for a book to be an object, more than just a collection of images by a given artist or by a given series of artists. So engaged in work with publishers, photographers and artists from all around the world. So Shahrzad Darafshe with Half-Light, she lives in Tehran. Primal Sight is curated by Ephraim Zalani Mendel, is a really remarkable collection of black and white works that we insisted on printing in white ink on black paper. And that sort of was one example of how we like to push the boundaries perhaps of how books can become physical in ways that are unexpected and ways that really kind of meet the form of the images. So by developing a book into a certain form, you elevate the images, you can create sequences, create the sense of storytelling that perhaps wouldn't be so obvious in the traditionally conceived idea of a book, which would be Knives, right? Very, very linear, nicely printed, yes, but how far can we push that idea? Birthe and I got to know each other, I want to say was it 2017 around about?
Yes.
With her book Abendlied, and she had won this Ed Batinsky grant that presented some funds for the production of a book. Let's see why. And so Birthe reached out and we started talking, and I was immediately drawn to the subject matter of the book and the kind of very, I don't know, the images were very redolent of a certain moment in European history that I feel like, being probably around the same age as Birthe, although I look super old, that just took me back to this specific place. And I was really excited to try and bring that to life as a book. So Birthe, let's start talking about Abendlied. What is Abendlied?
Yeah. Abendlied is a collection of photographs that I worked on, I want to say for about 7 years, 8 years. And it's pictures of my immediate family, so my parents, my sisters, and my nephew and my niece, who all live in Germany. And I, as Harper in the introduction told you guys, like I live in Vancouver and British Columbia in Canada. And so the project basically started to happen, and I wasn't aware that it was a project or that it would even lead to a book at some point. Was happening when I, about once a year, I would travel home to see my family in Germany. And it was around the time, like in 2011, that my mother got diagnosed with dementia. And so I could tell that when I went home, just, on these like frequent visits, that things were changing in my mother, but also in my childhood home. And so I started just taking pictures, not so much to kind of capture anything, to kind of have a sense of like feeling that I, wanted to conserve something. It was probably a bit more the idea. Hey, Jason, do you want to? We can still see the slideshow,
yes.
And you probably need to reshare the
better.
No, you're still small.
I'm still small. Oh, interesting. Huh.
You're so small.
How do I do this? Maybe someone has to select me because you're speaking. It's probably going to automatically. Maybe someone has to pin my video. Maybe I have to pin my video. Can I pin my video? Who knows? But anyway, here, how do we do this? Sorry, we didn't practice this part.
We didn't practice this part. you'd have to kind of like probably also, are you still sharing your screen?
No, this
You
is
need to share your screen somehow.
Oh, maybe. Okay, I can also just go back to the stills if that's helpful. Or if individual viewers want to pin this video, that will work.
Okay. Pin. I'm pinning you.
All right, pin me.
I have pinned you. It works. I can see it. So everybody pin Jason's screen. So then you can see it bigger. Do you all know how to pin? The teacher in me. Do you all know how to pin the yeah, okay. So so where was I? Yeah, the book and how it started. So yeah, so it wasn't so much about like capturing something. It was probably really a lot more about expressing something and trying to make sense of what I witnessed and what my family witnessed, and kind of feeling of being almost, yeah, just like being quite overwhelmed in what we saw, as we had seen all this with my grandmother 2 decades before, and so there was like this immense feeling of loss and grief and being overwhelmed. So I would travel to Germany once a year, and every time I was home, I would I want to say collaborate with my family, because these images are all staged. My family really cooperated and helped me make these photographs. And so I would set up images, or I would set up like my camera and be like, okay, this is the location, this is what I have in mind, this is what I want to express, this is what I would like you to wear. And then my family would basically come in and help me realize it. And everything was shot on film, so I didn't see it. I didn't see the immediate results at the time, so I would travel back to Canada and then get my film processed and work on it and see what worked or what didn't work. And then I would have, like, over time, create this shot list of like, okay, next time I go, I want to do this. And it all culminated in this, and at the end, when my parents actually sold the house, my childhood home where we'd lived for 40 years. And my parents moved up closer to my younger sister into closer to a care home where my mom now is. And you see, there's my family engaging with each other. They're engaging with all these objects that are part of our or have been part of our house. The objects are kind of stand-ins for me. I treat objects very much like I treat portraits in a way. They express something. I try to kind of like charge them with emotion, or charge them with meaning. And it's all these objects that we all have in our houses, but like that make our houses, our homes, the things that have always been there, that have been passed down. It's a little bit out of focus. Jason, I don't know if it's just the oh yeah, there it is.
There we go.
Much better. I thought it was my resolution, just like but it was the focus. So yeah, so it's these objects that my family is engaging with. And then and so I think kind of like halfway through, or I don't know, it was really open-ended. Like I didn't have a plan of like how long I would take these pictures or when I would feel that it was finished. I think it felt like a little bit like it came to like this natural end when my parents moved and the house was sold. And then I continued with a few more images in the new house, or in the new place. But by then also my mom's condition had deteriorated quite a bit, and she wasn't really able to participate in these pictures anymore. And I certainly didn't want to do anything without her consent. And so then the project kind of found its kind of natural end. And I think it was then that I started, and I think it's now kind of like for me, the kind of idea of like, what is in the book and why do we make the book? And for me, I think it was the amount of images, but also to kind of make something maybe like everything I tried in these photographs is like trying to make something tangible. And I think a photo book is like the extension of that, like to, you know, make a project really quite tangible. So where it can live, where it can, where you can revisit it, where you can really like spend time with it and go, you know, back and forth and create your own flow when you meditate on one page and then revisit it a few days later and like encounter a different page. And every time I look at this book, like I find it is like I mean, obviously I have a different relationship with it because it's my family and I know how these images were made, but like I encounter it in a different way every time I see it. So yeah, and I think there is something like what you said, Jason, the idea of like turning it into an object. And as someone who's really interested in objects in general, like I'm interested in the relationship we have with objects. I'm interested in like photographs as objects. And so for that reason, like I think it is like to me, like creating an object that you can spend time with was pretty was almost like a no-brainer. Should I talk about how I found you?
I guess you could. I think it's probably through our friend Brian, right?
Yeah. I was like, I had made a book. I made two books before, and one was the idea of North, which was quite successful. It won the Critical Mass Book Award, and I got like, that's kind of when I tipped my toe in the water to kind of see, you know, like what it is like to have somebody like publish a book for you. And but that book was it was tied to an award and it was really wonderful. It was like a really amazing opportunity. But because of the nature of this award, like I wasn't, I didn't have, like I created, I think I designed it, but there were quite a few more limitations. And it was my first book. I didn't really know exactly how to go about it. And so then the next book I did was like a handmade, self-published production that I never really ended up, like it's like it only exists as like 5 copies and is kind of like more like a collector's item. So with this one though, like I was like, okay, I don't really see, like I wanted this to be like out there in a different way. And so I think I put together a dummy. I don't know if you have the dummies, the beautiful dummies that
let's go back to the beginning.
Right there.
Yeah.
So I made these dummies and I was like, okay, it's all shot on a Hasselblad. It's a square format. It has to be a square book for whatever reason. I was just like, I will do the one thing that nobody ever does. Like I'll do a square book. And so I sent this to a few, you know, the New Book Awards or, you know, all these, and didn't get much from it, but I got the Bertinsky Award. And so I was like, okay, that's fantastic. So now I have a little bit of money to get this produced. And then, yeah, it was like through, so like people, I'm part of the collective, the Cake Collective, and between all these people, there have been probably like a million books published between these people. And so the people had like, yeah, reach out to this person, that person. That's how I ended up like having you on my radar. And I remember I emailed you and you emailed back and I was like, hey, I have this thing, this book, here it is. And you emailed back like pretty much immediately. And he's like, yes, I'd be super happy to do it, but not, I think you right away, was just like, but we're not doing a square. We're not doing the orange cover. You're just done. I'm like, okay, let's chat about it. Yeah. I think I was totally trying, like I was trying so hard to really find something that, you know, like ties into the colors and of the photographs of the inside and like talks about this kind of 70s, 80s style. But I wasn't 100% convinced as well. And the left one like reminded me a little bit too much of a diary and was too cute. And yeah. Anyways, and then you came with your ideas and you're like, hey, let's do this. But this is what I think.
Yeah, it was really a fascinating thing. I mean, it very rarely, I guess I'm one of those people that if I get an email at the right time of day when I'm not stressing about something else and it excites me, I'm like, yes, let's do this, which sounded like it surprised you a bit. But one of the things that really drew me to the work was like I said earlier, that kind of incredibly physical sense of memory. And it reminded me heavily of, I'm half Norwegian. My family it lives in Oslo, and my uncle lives in this beautiful old house that uses much of the same color palette, being built around the same time as probably your parents' house was, as your photographs. And so the blue, as it contrasts to the orange, was really interesting to me. So straight away I started thinking, okay, so how can we use that orange, but in a way that's complementary to a blue? How do we use it in a way that feels appropriate to the cultural references that we're talking about? And I feel like, Abendlied means evening song, and it's a wonderful metaphor, I suppose, for these kind of the waning moments of the sum of a person's life, this very gentle outro playing. But I was interested in this sense that Abendlied could be presented like a school book. So some of these approaches use very sort of childish typography. I was really interested in, obviously, the very strong German heritage. And I think that's so compelling as a place to explore nuance, right? When I was a kid, I was born in '77. To us as children, the Second World War had ended about 7 minutes earlier. And so the idea, until I was in my 20s, of like visiting Germany was absurd to me. So I was really interested in that tension between seeing your father in his military uniform and all the humanity that goes along with these images. And that's something I was trying to bring out in the design. And we ended up kind of refining to get to a point where it felt sort of historically German, but dodged some of the more culturally sensitive aspects. And here's where we ended up. We looked at ways to include. Where is it? Come on. Oh, there we go. Ways to include the notion of an actual evening song. If you look up Abendlied on Spotify or Tidal or anything, you'll find examples of what that song sounds like. I mean, there is a song called Abendlied, but there are probably many other songs that fall into that genre. So for a brief moment, we looked into how can we actually include sheet music in the book. Eventually that fell away to including this wonderful letter by Nick Hans McElroy to you that sort of carries the weight of an essay and does some explaining, but in a much more personal, moving way than I think most essays do. And so there is Abendlied. What else do we want to say about it? I hope, I feel like it has the size and scale and feel of a kind of school book. I love that it ages. Like in this copy that I've had on my shelf for a couple of years now, the edges of the pages are starting to yellow a bit with UV light. And so even though I didn't probably know that was going to happen at the time, I really enjoy it now. These books have life, and they'll stay. Whenever you come back to them after many, many years, they'll keep bringing you different gifts.
Yeah. Do you have, speaking of that, do you have like one of those like best books, like like a book you always return to, or you like, I wish I would have gotten the first edition of this one or something?
Gosh, that is a great question.
Usually it's always like The Americans, Robert Frank. It's always like
I had one book by Toshio Shibata that was ruined when my upstairs neighbor flooded his bathroom.
No.
And I did recently have a curious moment where a printer sent me an example of a book they printed, which I already own, but which was not the same as the book I already owned. And I discovered that the first edition was printed far more meticulously than the second. But no, I mean, I don't know. The book I have is the book I have. No, I have this. I'm the same, and it's interesting because I have so many books, and I think we could argue also, like, I mean, it's such a rich, and I don't know if saturated is the right word, because that would mean like there are enough,
I think there's so many photo books, and everybody wants to make books. And if you've ever been to, like, I mean, you go there all the time, but yeah, like before the pandemic, like LA Book Fair, you know, printed matter, like it's crazy. You think like, why would I make another book, right? Like, I mean,
Yeah,
but it seems like this, like, it's almost like an addict, right? Like you almost like once you get in it, and you really, I mean, I don't know, do you feel like you're addicted a little bit? Like, you know, to the beauty of like paper stock. I don't know, all the different ways of like bringing a project to life. I don't know.
Yeah. No, I'm super fascinated by that. And because we have a pipeline of books being made right now, and what I always find is usually there's a moment where something clicks for me, and I kind of feel what I think is the essence of the book, and then from there it's plain sailing. It's like you can probably do it in the space of an afternoon, but sometimes it takes a while to get to that moment, and once you find it, every other decision becomes easy, because it's like, well, of course the paper should be slightly creamy and not like a cool white, or of course it should have some tooth to it and not be super smooth. And so you balance all the decisions about budget versus reality, and hopefully outcomes a book. But yeah, I 100% feel, you know, when you walk around an art book fair, it's very easy to feel overwhelmed by all the different photo books on offer. And it's one of the reasons why I think that what we do can be so painful and so powerful, is that I hate making books that anyone could have made. Now, anyone can make a great book, but we're super fortunate to be able to collaborate with these amazing, mostly Dutch printers who have this generational knowledge of, and I'll take them books, right? So we were just making Shane Rochelow's new book, Lakeside, and with this marvelous printer in Holland called Robstalk. And we don't get into arguments, but they'll say, well, Jason, why haven't you done this? Or like, have you considered that? And all of their knowledge, you know, I don't know how many Robstalk makes, but Wilco, who printed our book Like with Ryan Dabolsky, they make, I think, literally like 20,000 books a year. So they've seen every success and every failure. Whereas we, you know, there have been some books that we've made where printers didn't give us immediate feedback like that before the book's made, and we get it back from the printer. It's like, oh, this feels awful in the hand. Very few, thank God. Like now I actively seek out that feedback. But it's a terrible feeling to be like, well, I blew that one. Doesn't happen too often, thank God.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting. I mean, if we look at the large, how large was the edition? Just a question. It was 500, right, for both?
So,
yeah. Just double check. Yeah. Interesting. I mean, like, I'm so like, why I was so drawn to your work was like really first of all, you also being a photographer and a photo-based artist, and like really I feel like sharing the same like the same language around photography and the care that goes into you know, making a photograph, and understanding what it takes to, you know, to get to that point, to create a really compelling body of work. I think that is very different, and that doesn't mean that like publishers who don't have a photo background themselves can't be great publishers, but I think there is something about that common language that definitely helps and really resonated with me. But I'm always amazed, because I feel like by now you've made like you've published quite a few books, and each of them is so unique and visually stunning, and it's almost, yeah, like you can feel the care that goes into it. It's almost like, you know, you're sitting with the project and you're kind of like, who are you, what's going on, like who do you want to be, right? And so I'm always curious, and like looking at Janus, maybe you want to go into the next project, you know, which is obviously like a very different, it's a very different project, and I kind of like put that on you. It's just like, hey, want to see what I'm doing? And didn't really, because we were like, just keep talking, like next project, keep me posted. And it is, there's something interesting, because like there's a continuation in the book, or in the language of the book, but in this like really nice, like really mirroring the continuation of like what is going on in the photographs. Because there is obviously an overlap in, you know, the way I'm looking at objects and the kind of playfulness and that I bring forward in, like, you know, making these still lifes or these performative still lifes. And I think it's just like really amazing how you kind of, yeah, picked up on that, but like created its own entity without copying anything that, you know, we did in Abendlied. So I don't know if you want to maybe talk a bit about how this came to life.
I think that there's something really interesting in, you know, what you said about me also being a photo-based artist. I should mention Shane Rochelot is now an inextricable part of Gnomic book, and he touches everything we do. And so when Birthe reached out to me and said, hey, I've got this thing, Janus, that I'm working on, Shane and I were like, yes, let's see these pictures. And that was really, I don't think you could necessarily have had that process with a different, I mean, I'm sure there are other publishers who are also photo-based artists, but one of the things that I really enjoyed about it was that it was really a collaborative project, and you weren't done with the images yet. So you came in and said, here's what we have. I responded to it immediately as usual. And I was fascinated by, you know, I guess what the best way to describe it, and Birthe, correct me if I'm wrong, but this is the way I kind of intuitively responded to it, was that you'd begun work on this project pre-COVID. It is a super introspective, self-reflective project, and then COVID happened. It was like, well, what else am I going to do? So you stayed in your studio for, you know, the next year or so, making these wonderful images in which you become like an object and objects become like you. And I think I probably sequenced this this deck, not ideally, but one of the things I was so fascinated by, you know, we looked at this typeface for the title, and you said you felt it looked masculine. I said it's not. I still don't feel it's especially masculine, but what I really gravitated towards was the way that whatever you call the dangly bit on the A, evoked the dangly, if that is indeed a tulip.
It is a tulip.
Okay, I know these things. And so we started exploring, I don't know, let's click. So we started exploring different ways of bringing that to life, of kind of erosion and change and whatnot. And eventually, oh, hello, I even did this crazy particle test.
Oh, I've never seen this one.
Never saw it, yeah. I don't know if you can even really see it on the screen, but basically to try and generate those sort of dusty Indiana Jones type particles coming off the type, we did that. It didn't work in the end, and we ended up with this fingerprint type thing that I was really interested in, and the idea that it would be quite hard to see on the cover. So a few more iterations, and we ended up with this. The scale is much bigger. I don't know if you guys can see the thumbnail here, but like, you know, here's Janus, here's Abendlied. Janus feels in scale much more like a fashion magazine. So it's really big, and I was excited to use, whereas Abendlied was all single pages like that. In Janus, I was really excited to really max out the image area. And so there's a lot of spreads, and one of the things that comes with that is you have to work with a printer and a binder who know how to make images not disappear into the gutter. But yeah, let's talk about these images a bit and what they mean to you.
Yeah, I mean, okay, how did this start? Yeah, it started pre-COVID. I want to say like a half a year before the pandemic hit, and I think I had just started the full-time teaching, and lots of things had changed in my life, and I feel like the topic of change obviously is something that has been like one of my major themes. Like, you know, how do you make change? It's also interesting to think of it that I'm using photography very much to make change visible or capture something, freeze time, all of that. It's almost like, you know, you're kind of trying to make something visible that is invisible. But I'm not like, so like, as I said with Abendlied as well, like I'm not so interested really like in the capturing of holding on, like in that sense, and the freezing of I'm not like so interested in that. I'm more interested in like expressing how I feel about change, I guess, and making that change visible to me, or the emotions that I have about that, that feeling that things are kind of sometimes spinning out of control, and you try to make sense of it. I was also, like, as I said, I'm like really interested in like in objects, and I was already you know, I played with that a lot in my previous projects, like whether that is like the kind of household objects in Abendlied, but even like in projects before, you know, utilize like everyday objects to and also organic matter to transform that, or to kind of charge it with meaning. And so here I am basically, so the fact that I was like, yeah, that's how I got there. Like I started full-time teaching, and so many people said to me, like, when you start, when you teach full-time, you'll never make work again. You'll just, you know, that's it, like you're done with that. And I was like, okay, this is not going to happen to me. I'll just like get myself a project that I can do, you know, at home. So every weekend I would like work on these images just in the corner of my studio. And then the pandemic hit, and it's exactly what you said. Like there was that, you know, it's like, okay, what else am I going to do now? And there was this sense of like, I wanted to capture not only just the passage of time. I think there was a, they're all like taken in the same corner of the studio, similar time of day, and we can talk about this in a second. But I think mostly I was thinking about kinship and allyship, and being alone during the pandemic, having, you know, like my life had dramatically changed. My marriage had fallen apart before that. I was just by myself, and so I was thinking a lot about like kinship, and this kind of looking at like the extension of the body, the extension of the self. I was thinking about, in many ways, also like thinking about, yeah, like how do we relate to the material world? How do we relate to the organic world? What is a longing of, and you said that so beautifully, and we'll talk about this hopefully, like when we talk about that essay, you said that so beautifully, like this longing to become somebody else, to be someone else, and in all of that also like this kind of playful investigation of like, oh, I don't have to be me, I can be somebody else, or I can, you know, like this the kind of play, for me these images are like there's a lot of play here, like a lot of like, but who says I am this and not that? And so there's that, there's like a sadness, there's like a letting go, there's a the idea of yeah, like of transition, of transforming, of transformation, of aging, but also of new beginnings, of and then there was like in this case, and like now that we're looking at this one, really also thinking about the history of art, and yeah, like these genres and how artificial they are in many ways, how we label things, how, you know, like the still life genre and the performance, like, you know, performance, and the whole idea around like the like also like, I mean, like I'm really interested in sculpture and using my body and this, like, you know, as you said, like, you know, turning my body into an object. And so thinking a lot about, you know, the role of the woman in the 20th Western art history of being the muse, and, you know, and the model, and performing for the camera. And so all of this, I think, came into this this project of so some very like personal motivations, and others are more like yeah, I guess more like my investigation into these genres and the objectification of a body, or and charging these inanimate objects with life and turning them into like more like into bringing them to life, I guess, in the collaboration with my body. Yeah,
there it is.
Yeah. And you did something, so in many ways this project is about time, and then you picked up on this like right in the beginning, and you dug into the data of these. That was super important. These images are all taken on digital camera, like on my digital camera, and that was the first time. Before that, like I would always shoot film, but due to the restriction of the pandemic and everything, I was like, okay, screw this, it's going to be digital. And that gave you the opportunity to actually, like, you dug into the files, and I don't know if you have that graph of,
I don't
you did like a total Sherlock Holmes investigation of like looking into like the time of the image when these images were made. And that's kind of how the titles and the use of the day and time, right? Like I don't know if we have a picture of that. Like maybe you want to talk about this.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, so the files as you first provided them had these very sort of perfunctory titles, like ginger0899.tiff. And I was really interested in that because it is such a departure from the way Abendlied was photographed. Those were all made between, I couldn't say the dates, but within a few years of each other. And to look at the images, you probably don't know. I mean, maybe you have some recollection of which trip the specific image was made on, but they all kind of become a cloud. Mm-hmm. Whereas with this, by virtue of being digital, there's so much more data associated with it. And I dug into the metadata and made a graph of it. I think I automated it somehow. But basically, I was curious to know, you were using the same place in your studio every day between specific hours. And I remember I called you and said, hey, what's up with that? And you said, oh, right. The light comes in exactly at that time. And that's generally speaking when I'm going to be shooting to get the image I want. And I was really interested in that sort of repetition and experimentation that was much less organic. Mm-hmm. The work is still very organic. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to print it on an uncoated paper again, to sort of get away from the digitalness perhaps that might have been inherent. Mm-hmm. And again, these will change with time too, the way that uncoated paper does more than coated paper does. But yeah, I was really interested in all of that, everything you said, and then the way the images pertain to art history, mm-hmm. right? Sculpture, Dora Maar's images, Alexandros of Antioch, and how those really, I mean, this image especially, mm-hmm. where is it? So backwards, relates to that photograph of yourself with I think a cabbage leaf mm-hmm. on your shoulder. So yes, you are sort of subverting all this existing language of art history and reapplying it to this very specific digital moment in 2020 when we're all stuck in our homes doing bread.
Baking bread. Yeah, right. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm just looking at the time. So we've been rambling for 45 minutes, and I see there's a question. I don't know if we want to. I have one more thing I wanted to address.
Yeah.
The fact that you, which was really, really unique and really wonderful. So it's always, I find it always such a challenge. You have your book, you have your images, and then it's like, well, what's the text? Do we have text? What's the text? Right? It's always like that. I've never had, I think it also for myself, but also for all my friends who are into books. It's like, where do you, like I've never had one person who's like, I have this amazing text and now let's come up with some images or something, right? It's always the other way around. And how much explaining do you do? How much, usually it's like, oh yeah, I want to have like this high profile writer and like kind of have that pat on the shoulder, like, and I never felt like I want to have like a really, like dry essay, obviously, like that never feels, I mean, who wants that? But so so the fact that like you actually wrote the essay for Janus was like so to me, like I had to wrap my head around that first when you're like, can I write something? And I'm like,
Bear in
you?
mind, I don't write a lot of essays, so I'm
Right?
really asking you to trust me.
I was a little like, yeah, sure, go for it. I mean, if I don't like it, we won't. But you totally nailed it. So I guess there was something, it was so beautiful. And I remember, so my sister's here, I'm not calling her out, but I'm calling her out. I remember being in Germany when at the time when that essay came in, and I was like, hey, and my sister's a writer. And she's obviously, she knows me really well, and she's been part of all my projects. And so I was like, here, have a read. Like, what do you think? And you got totally approved by her. And yeah, anyway, so I feel like it was a beautiful moment for me, because I feel like really felt like that here comes a compliment, like that I really felt like you got me and you got my work. And obviously I see that like in, you know, when you do the design, but in the way you extended that into the writing, the way you wrote about the work, I was like, oh no, he fully understood what, you know, what I wanted to say with these images. So just as my belated big thank you again for that beautiful essay.
That's kind of you to say, and it's so funny because I've definitely had conversations when other artists and whatnot look at my work and they say, well, you must have meant this. And I say, oh, no, I didn't, at least not consciously. And so it's so easy for people to superimpose their own intention or understanding onto someone else's. And yeah, I think the reason I wanted to write that essay was because the work spoke to me so clearly, I think. And I was definitely dreading, you know, I probably spent a few months writing that thing, and I was dreading showing you, because like, yeah, I bet this has nothing to do with what she was thinking, but yeah, I'm glad it did.
You nailed it. Yeah.
What do you think? Should we look at some of these questions?
Yeah.
I just want to jump in really quickly because I know some folks might jump off, but I also want to mention these books are extremely tactile, and so many decisions go into kind of that you really just can't tell. If you were in Portland on April 21st, Photo Lucida's art book fair at the Portland Art Museum, Jason and Birthe are both going to be there. So if you actually want to handle these books and ask them more questions, that is your go-to.
Oh yeah, thanks. Portland, here I come.
Yeah.
Yes.
If they let you in.
If they let me in.
Yeah, Yuyan has a question. What do you find to be the most challenging aspect of making a book, both as an artist and a publisher?
Gosh, that's such an interesting question. Behind me, I don't know if I mentioned at the beginning of the call, there's 2,200 pounds of Shane's new book. And I feel like for me, the most challenging parts of making these books is the logistical aspect. So how we're going to fund the book, how we're going to move the book. When I lived on the East Coast and pre-COVID, it was relatively straightforward. A couple grand puts the book on a plane and you have it 5 days later. Since COVID, it's been taking about 3 months for books to get to us. And it's so hard it's impossible to plan. Shane's book was supposed to take 1.5 months and it ended up taking 3. So trying to manage a release schedule around that it's my least favorite part of the process. It's like, okay, we spent all this blood, sweat, and tears making a book, and now the hard part is like essentially the boring bit. So that to me is it. I mean, I'm so fortunate to be able to work with artists and projects that spark a passion in me. So generally speaking, the design aspect of it isn't rocket science. Yeah. Does that help?
My book also took forever, right? It was supposed to be there in October, and I think at some point we always you looked up the ship that was the journey, and then it was cruising at the port of Los Angeles, and it just that was definitely really nerve-wracking. The least favorite part for me, aside from the money. I don't know. I guess it's I mean, not saying least. It's kind of it's both, because it can be also the most exciting part. It's like when you hand it over, you're basically, it's like you're so vulnerable. You worked on this for so long, and you're like, okay, here's my folder with files, go for it. And then that's like such a and then obviously like you're so like nervous, and it's like, okay, what is he coming up with? And I remember that, like, I was excited when I saw, for example, for the first Abendlied covers, and I was excited when I saw the colors, but like the first direction of the font was like traumatic for me, because it was like so German Second World War, you know, and I was like, oh my God, no, like this was like not what I had in mind. And so that was like a really nerve-wracking moment. And so I guess it's that, like, it's the two sides. It can be like the most exciting part when, you know, something comes back and you're like, oh my God, I've never thought about this. This is like beautiful. Or it's like also it's like, this is really not how I envisioned it. And how am I now going to negotiate the, you know, anyway. So I think that's like a part that is like, once you're like in this like flow, like once you're kind of like really landed on the same page, okay, now let's just, you know, fine tune it, and then it's really a lot of fun. I know there's people like talking about the gutter, and people don't like the gutter, and I have to say I'm totally not that I'm like, oh, I love the gutter. It's not like, oh man, but like I was definitely like, I think it was one of those things that I said to Jason in the beginning, and maybe because of the intimate size of the Abendlied work, that I was like, I always envisioned the Janus work like bigger, bolder, definitely like a little bit more like a magazine thing. And maybe because of that, I was like, I wanted to see the pictures bigger. Like I didn't want to see them like contained on one page. I have a history as an editorial photographer, so I've worked a lot for like publications, and so from that, like maybe it's also that I'm like really used to you know, working with a double page and spreading. Like I really like the spread. I like that. I think there's something about it also to that's for me like what a photo book can do, how different I perceive a photo book than like from obviously like having the print on the wall, where it is like really kind of, you know, prestige, and you know, you want to get it right, and it has to be the right size, and it needs to be neatly framed. But I think I like when it kind of gets in a photo book a little bit more playful, and you can kind of like mess it up a little bit in a way. So I have to see. I have to say, like, I don't mind the gutter at all, as long as like nothing is like completely disappearing in it.
Yeah, I think we have so much history. I think in the US there's this, I could talk about it forever, this tendency to choose paper stocks that are really heavy and thick to kind of mimic the feel of a real print. But the downside of that is that you have much less flexibility in the spine. And it's funny, sometimes I'll go to a printer in Holland and I'll submit a request. So, sake of argument, this book is printed on 135 grams per square meter paper. That was the request I put in, and they said the quote that came back said we priced it for 150 instead of 135, which is heavier and thicker. And I said, why? And they said, well, you're American. I was like, first of all, only kind of, and secondly, like the lay flat is always important to us. And so, I mean, like this thing, look at that, Shazam. That's what you can do if you have great binding, and that allows the image to flow relatively seamlessly. Of course, there'll always be a little bit of a discrepancy, just a millimeter or so lost. But yeah, for me, I'm always kind of reminding myself that the book is a fundamentally different art form than the print, and it allows you to do so many other things, like, you know, for the sake of argument, in this one, here we have a relatively standard photo printing paper, but as soon as you get into the book, you have this paper called Ebo 1 that's incredibly thin and translucent and vulnerable and fragile. And then in the center, you have this uncoated section that behaves totally differently from the coated bits. And so those opportunities, I think, for me, outweigh the downside of having, a millimeter lost in the spine or something. So that's where I'm at. But, to each their own.
Yes, for sure. Yeah. Any other questions?
I don't think, well, thank you so much. Jason has been so kind of generous. I've been thinking a lot as you were talking, kind of just about the portability and like the gifting of these, and how when so often we see work come through the gallery that most people can afford or don't have the ability to store or hang, and like the book is just such a it's a gift. It's accessible, and Jason has actually been so kind to gift us a lot of books from Gnomic Press. So if you are interested in seeing kind of the other publications and the choices that they've made, we have those in our resource library. They're endlessly fascinating. I feel like every time you come in, I have so many questions for you about, the decisions that went behind these, individual works of art that you do. So thank you so much. Deeply appreciate it. And hopefully we'll see you in Portland soon.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you so much. That was wonderful. Hey, by the way, in my Google Doc on the last page that I don't think we ever got to it, I put this is really cheesy. I probably should have asked you about this first, but there's a little promo code, Blue Sky 15. Gets you 15% off at gnomicbook.com if you're interested.
We love that.
Totally.
Yes, and both of these books are available on Gnomic Book, as well as at the photo book fair coming up in April. Multiple opportunities to get your hands on them. Yes, if you want to throw that promo code up there, we can also send it out just as a reminder to everyone.
Where is it? Being Blue Sky 15.
Oh, Blue Sky 15. Yes, thank you. Awesome. All right, thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Have a great day.
Have a great day. Bye-bye.
Yes.